your end, Carrie?
Good.
Good. Okay. So this session is titled Finding Strength in Diversity, reminding ourselves to enact strength-based approaches. This is being presented by Bree Mortini and Carrie Cormier. Let's talk a little bit about who we are. Carrie, go ahead.
So I am Carrie Cormier. This is my 4th year at Rowan University. I am an instructor as a faculty member and also working on my doctorate in special education. And so I am a former high school English special education teacher. Bree, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. I am Bree Mortini. I am finishing up, I believe it's my 8th year at Rowan University as a faculty member. I'm an associate professor of interdisciplinary and inclusive education. And in my former life, I was a kindergarten inclusion teacher. So both Carrie and I come to this work with a lot of practical experience on inclusion and supporting children's very varied learning needs. We want to use that introduction to segue into a deeper sense of who we are. So the Crew Center has developed what is called an identities circle, which is what we're showing you here. And identity is made up of several factors, one being race, another being personality, another being gender, economic class, ability, and also learning preferences, I'd like to add, and religion. And of course, there's a lot more to this, but these are some deeper and very varied ways to think about identity. And it's important that we think of who we are in a sense of identity, but also who the students in our classroom are and all of the varied factors that are comprising how they might perceive a lesson or how we might be perceiving them and their behavior. So you may have heard the phrase, you can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. We feel that this cartoon is a good illustration of why we as educators really need to pause and remind ourselves about all of the assets that children do bring into the classroom and the variety of learning opportunities that we present to children through our lessons. And so this is obviously just a cartoon of someone making an evaluation of all of these different animals and fish in the same way. So it's using the same criterion to judge and evaluate everyone. And this is just a really good illustration of how that's not fair, and it's also not accurate. More recently, neurodiversity has emerged as the science behind developmental differences and different ways of thinking and learning, particularly for individuals who live with autism or are on the spectrum. And so this is a great quote to share, so I'm going to read it. Humans think, feel, perceive, process, and experience the world in vastly different ways. This beautiful diversity of human minds with infinite variation in traits and abilities is known as neurodiversity. And so if we think back to the identity circle, as well as neurodiversity, we can really start to appreciate, as you all know, that no two learners in our classroom are the same.
And so one of the things that we've come to love about New Jersey is how diverse New Jersey is. And so really thinking about one particular aspect of diversity is ability. And so New Jersey has a very strong school system that has been nationally recognized, but we need to improve in the area of segregating students with disabilities. Full inclusion by the National Council of Disability is considered to be spending 80% or more of a student's day in the general education setting. New Jersey is ranked, sadly, number 49th in the country for full inclusion. We have the highest number of students that are sent to separate schools or residential facilities. And we also have a very high number of students who are spent less than 40% of their day in the general education setting. So some schools that do have high rates of inclusion are, sorry, can you go to the next slide?
Sure.
Oh,
There we go.
so some states that do have high rates of inclusion, where they have 70% or more of their students fully included, are Florida, New Hampshire, Oregon, Colorado, the Bureau of Indian Education, Kentucky, North Dakota, Nebraska, Vermont, and Alabama. And Alabama has the highest rate of students spending 80% or more of the day in the general education setting. So that means all of their support services are occurring in general education rather than have students moved out to receive services. And so we have, again, the highest percentage of students being sent to separate schools in the entire country, a high number of students in New Jersey spending the majority of their classroom in a separate setting. And so this is one area where New Jersey, having one of the strongest educational systems in the country, can really focus on our improvement so that all students have access to the very amazing educational opportunities we have in this state. So some of the barriers to inclusion that we can talk about, right, is how have we not made our numbers shift? And so in their 2016 article, Collins and Ferry asked, how is it that decades after the disability rights movement and 30 years now since the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, inclusion in classrooms and schools is still treated as optional? So this is part of the reason why New Jersey has such low inclusion rates are these common excuses that we see on these cartoons. So thinking about teachers might be saying, you know, we've tried that before and it didn't work. Or I agree with inclusion philosophically, but, or it costs too much. Our system might be too big, our system might be too small. What we do now is just fine. I'm sure it works well in other places, but not here. And it's against my religion, being a humorous one, and it's not within my authority. So really kind of pushing this idea of inclusion off to somebody else or pushing it higher up. And so this comes from Michael Giangreco, who does a lot of cartoons like this, capturing some of the barriers within special education. And so he titles this one, Exclusion plus Excluses equals Excluses. And so I'm sure we've heard many of these excuses within our schools, within our buildings, within the district, and really thinking about, is it our attitudes that we bring to inclusion that's really preventing us in New Jersey from, you know, catching up with all the other states that are successfully doing it?
Yeah, and I know as a classroom teacher, I think I was guilty of some of these because I really thought that for some of my students, that they were going to be better served being pulled out for certain services. And so thinking back, you know, I just wonder, was that because of the system I was in? And I think a lot of times, of course, for all of us, that is, it's just the way it's set up. But I'm always kind of revisiting in my head, you know, how could I um, have done more to support those children's needs within my own classroom?
And so really kind of helping us understand how to make this shift to these strength-based approaches and inclusive thinking, we can really root our practices in some of the theories. So some of the theories that Bree and I might pull from are disability studies in education, recognizing ability profiling and disability stigma, looking at teacher identity, and looking at critical pedagogy. And so from all of these different scholarly perspectives, really helping us build our inclusive mindsets. And so as we dug more into these different theories, these different concepts, we had this aha moment where we're like, we need to be more inclusive ourselves. So thinking about what perspectives do we need to create and sustain inclusion, cultures of inclusion. And so starting at the top left, disability studies in education is a field of study where we really kind of highlight how inclusive education has to include multimodal, universally designed approaches so all students can be given opportunities to show competence. Recognizing on the top right that ability profiling and disability stigma exist. So ability profiling is when we're only looking at a student's label and not looking at the student holistically. And we're primarily seeing them through their label and not their name, right? Who is the student? Like, what is their name? What is it about that student that I need to know beyond their label? and recognizing how disability labels attach a stigma to a student, and that stigma is carried throughout their life. And that is something that they will grapple with throughout school and beyond even. And so recognizing that and realizing that that is an area where we can really improve our work. And then also thinking about our teacher identity, right? Teaching is a political act, right? There is politics involved in determining which students get labeled, who gets access, how we're going to invite students and welcome them into our classroom. And so considering the politics of our practice and how that impacts and how it aligns or conflicts with how we view ourselves as teachers. And so recognizing that we as teachers are constantly changing who we are, how we see ourselves, how our practice is, and that it's fluid, it's dynamic. And so how can we change to become more inclusive? And so I even think back to the teacher that I was, when I started years ago and who I am now, it's vastly different. And I'm okay with that, right? Because I have learned as I've read more and as I've worked more with students. So recognizing that change and changing our beliefs and who we are is a good thing. And finally, thinking about critical pedagogy, right? And so making teachers active learners alongside their students. So it's not like this is my classroom, right? I set the rules, that it's our classroom. We're moving away from the me as a teacher to the our as a classroom community. And so situating ourselves alongside our students to learn new content. What is it that they bring in, right? Um, Given the access of technology, so many of the students know so much more about things than we do. And so really allowing them to become the experts alongside with us, and so that we co-construct our knowledge. So that way it is not this top-down approach, but a ground-up approach where we all learn together.
Mm-hmm. So now we want to really look at some examples, which we're going to be doing throughout the rest of the presentation about, teaching in a general education classroom and ways to really build an inclusive framework to be more inclusive in your practice, and building on students' assets. And so this first video is about a boy named Moises, who is an English language learner, and he is in an English speaking general education classroom. So let's take a look.
Hard, but that's all right because we're going to try really hard. Isn't that right, Cameron?
Yes, Ms. Peters.
Okay, great. Everyone listen up. So we're going to want to work on we get ours from the answer and the information in the story, okay? We're going to go ahead and test, factual test, and try this actus test. Oh, test your open up. We're going to create, you go to B. First on page 3.
¿Qué dijo? ¿A poco va a empezar el examen? No, es una práctica.
We're going to take notes from the story and we're going to turn it into a math problem and we're going to walk through it together, okay? So the boy ran 3 blocks. So everyone write 3 blocks.
I didn't even know. He looked like a stranger.
How long did it take him to run 3 blocks? Michelle?
6 minutes.
Very good, 6 minutes. All right, so then we would take 3 blocks and 6 minutes,
¿Por qué el
right?
niño corre con los bloques? ¿Qué? Sí, ¿por qué el niño corre con los bloques? No,
Okay, so the
corre 3
question's going to
calles.
go on to ask us, how long will it take him to run 20 blocks? What do we do? How many minutes is that per block?
8 minutes.
Try and remember to raise your hand if you want to answer, okay? No, it's not 8 minutes. Michelle?
18 minutes?
Nope, not 18 minutes. Yes, Enrique?
40?
40, yeah, very good. How'd you get 40?
I don't know.
You don't know? Well, 40 is the right answer. How did you get it?
I forgot.
You forgot. Okay. Does anyone know how we get 40? Moises. Yep, that's right. Very good. Great. Can you tell us how you got that?
40.
Yep, very good. But can you explain to the class what you did here, how you got that?
40.
Okay, all right, you guys, settle down.
That is so dumb.
Joe, do you want to lose your recess?
No.
Okay, then. Thank you, Moises.
Can you help me, please?
Can you take a walk with me? I don't want you to worry about the test, okay, Moises?
Sí, estoy preocupado sobre el examen. La directora Rosa dijo que todavía tenemos que hacer.
Just try your best, okay? Do you understand? Not importante.
Sí, sí es importante.
You're right, Moises. It is important.
Okay. And so let me get back to our presentation here.
Think about what it's like to enter a new school.
Carrie, can you see this?
Yeah, but it's in the
Okay.
window again. It's not in the full screen.
Not in full screen. Okay, let me see what I can do about that. No. Okay, not in full screen.
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
Exit.
Hmm. Let me see. Okay, here we go. Is that good?
Yep.
Okay. So what we want to do, sorry, everyone. We want to give everyone a few seconds to unpack some of this individually. So if you could just take about 10 or 20 seconds and think about some of the strengths that you saw from this teaching, and then some of the areas to grow for this teaching practice. Again, thinking about in terms of inclusion. So strengths and areas to grow. Okay, so some of the things that Carrie and I had brainstormed after we watched this video together in terms of the strengths were that the teacher is really encouraging students' critical thinking in mathematics. We thought that was really great. We also thought the teacher had some strong classroom management. It seemed to be a very large class, and perhaps upper elementary or maybe even middle school. They're doing word problems. We know that these are hard areas to really work at with students. And so the teacher did seem to have some pretty strong classroom management just to make sure that she had a good rapport with the students and that the students were treating each other kindly. She shut down some things that were unkind among the students. And so that was great. And then we were thinking some areas to grow for the teacher was that the teacher could allow the students to use the home language more. So Moises is a Spanish speaking student. We were wondering if there were other Spanish speaking students in the classroom that could help kind of make that bridge, either with some translation Or if the teacher could really, if she's picked up any Spanish along the way, just allowing the students to use some home language when possible. So either if they do turn and talk with each other, or, explaining things maybe in writing, just so it gets the students in the practice of not missing out on the lesson. But they're engaging in it also. So allowing that home language to be a part of the lesson. We also thought that learning buddies could really support the students who are new to the school, as well as the English language learners. And so, pairing students together that have perhaps the same home language or who can understand each other to really foster that talking in the classroom, particularly around mathematics, right? We want students to explain their thinking, to tell us how they got problems, which is what this teacher was really getting at. How did you get that? She wanted the students to be able to talk. So if Moises had the opportunity to turn and talk to a student who could understand his home language, then perhaps he would not have been able to share that with the class in English for all of the other students to understand, but he could have engaged in the practice of explaining his mathematical thinking aloud, which is really what the teacher was getting at.
We saw him doing that naturally on his own, where he was turning to his partner and asking for questions. And so it's taking that and not seeing that as a disruptive behavior, right? Because again, like we can't monitor every conversation that's happening in the classroom, but erring on the side of caution and on the side of good, like maybe they are actually, trying to help each other. And so giving them built-in opportunities to do that can really help all students be included from a strengths-based approach.
Mm-hmm. So this is a cartoon that Carrie and I found that we thought was a really good image that we wanted to share with you. I know a lot of people have gotten into houseplants, myself included, during the pandemic. And it's very true that every plant has their own requirements in order to grow. And we seem to naturally accept that. We know that some plants need bright light, some plants need indirect light, some plants need soil that stays moist, some plants need soil that dries out. They all have different needs so that they can grow at their own rate. And so do people. We know that we all have different needs and requirements, just like our students.
So another video that we want to show you, a quick clip here of inclusion in action. And so this one looking at including students with disability labels that require more and higher support needs. So the student is, go ahead, Bree, you can click on the link. The student is Tasha, and this comes from a clip from the film Including Samuel by Dan Habib. And so Dan Habib is, this wonderful filmmaker who captures all of these different aspects and needs and approaches related to inclusion. So this is from his film that centers his son in many ways, but several other people, right? And so working to get his son included.
Sorry, I think it's just buffering, maybe. No.
Tidak biasanya melakukan hal-hal.
When I first brought Tasha to school, I was a little nervous. I was worried because at home, Tasha didn't really do things like normal kids do. Sometimes she wouldn't listen to me, or sometimes she just screamed, or sometimes she just cries.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
I brought her to a doctor for the brain. He confirmed that this child does have autism.
First met Tasha, she would have meltdowns sometimes just if schedules were off or if people were different or if she just didn't get her way. Where are we going? Are we going to finish the book? So we wanted to be able to be proactive about constantly trying to try different things to make sure that she is able to express what she wants or needs or feels to the best of her ability.
Thin. It was another very thin, easy to pour liquid. How many states of matter are there again? Three. There are 3 states of matter. And what are the... When Tasha came to my class last year, she had a very basic, what we called a talk box, so a augmentative communication device. And it had like 5 basic pages of pre-programmed things, and she used it in structured settings that were the same all the time, so we could make calendar one of the pages that worked all the time. But we found that she was wanting to say and was more engaged than that device allowed.
And finally, last May, we were able to purchase, the district did, the Vantage Light for her to use. She is usually able to go through multiple steps to finding different things that she wants to say.
I am snack.
You're a snack?
Anything else?
The team itself went to a lot of trainings on how to support her using it, and she became a lot more involved in the classroom that way, socially and academically. So we were able to make pages that connected to every lesson in the room instead of just the things that happened every day all the time, as well as social pages of asking questions and telling jokes. And we found that once she got that, there were joke pages on it, and during snack time, all of the kids would come over and they'd ask her to tell them a joke. They would ask if they could touch it too.
Can Caitlin try? Yes or no? They wouldn't let us in.
Can Caitlin try? Yes or no?
I psycho. Her hands resting on my
Yes.
neck.
Thank you.
Since Tasha has had her device, her behaviors have decreased. In the small amount of time that she's had the device, it's also really increased her verbal output. She is saying...
Is that a good stopping point, Carrie?
Thank you.
All right.
So let's just take a minute to think about what were some of the strengths that you saw in this approach to including Tasha, and also what are some areas that you think the teachers might be able to grow in?
I'm trying to get back to my... Oh.
Love the picture though.
Oh, so sorry. Okay. Here on Google Chrome.
Could you put it in the chat and then you can just jump right into it?
Sure. So strengths and areas to grow. Yeah, I didn't mean to click out of that. Sorry, everyone.
So while we get set up here, we can just talk through some of these things. So some of the strengths that we saw were certainly that they took her interest in music, right, and use that as a way to engage her in the classroom. So really kind of drawing on what the students' strengths are, what their interests are to keep them engaged in the classroom. And also that they were very resilient, right, and that they did not give up just because something worked one day and didn't work the next day. They didn't just throw the whole thing out. They kept at it. They kept trying to find ways that worked, and they were very flexible in it. And so some other strengths that might have thought of was that they included her throughout the entire day, right? That she was in that classroom with her same age peers, learning the same material, the same content, learning it a little bit differently, but still engaged with it. And another strength was that they realized that, they presumed competence, right? That she was capable of doing it. It was just a matter of helping her with her communication, with her output. And so they really focused in, and everybody was involved in the trainings on her communication devices. And so recognizing that, communication devices, that there is, debate around them and about their uses, but that they were willing to give it a try. And that they saw with her access to communication that she was then able to have a more holistic approach experience in school, that she was socially included, that she was academically included, that she was involved in the classroom, in all aspects of the classroom, that she became a member of that community. So some areas for the teachers to grow. Bree, you're almost there.
Here we go. I am so sorry. Okay.
This last year has been an issue for all of us.
Oh, goodness.
So again, her strengths, that she was included 80% or more of the day, fully included in the classroom. And that, again, that access to communication increased her holistic ability, right? She was socially involved. She was telling jokes through her device, which is a fantastic thing to see. Some areas that they might, that school might be able to grow in and work on is, again, this idea of using learning buddies to help the students more so than the adult. Having the adults kind of back off so that the students are with their peers more rather than being dependent on adults more. And letting them learn from each other, right? Kids will naturally be more inclusive. And then also training the students on the AAC devices to increase this independence, right? So that, she's not going to have her paraprofessional with her on the playground. And if she wants to talk to the students on the playground and she's having an issue with her sensory motor system, that her fellow friends can step in and help her, right? If she wants to go to the movies outside of school or go to a birthday party, that, her classmates who will be there, assuming that they will be there, they can help her with that device. So it's not just a device for communication in an academic setting, but it's a device for her to use in all settings. So Bree, if you can jump to the next slide. So kind of thinking about inclusion beyond academics, right? And we saw that at the end of Tasha's clip, is that she was using it to tell jokes and to become, social in her classroom. So drawing on her strengths and drawing on some of the theories of inclusion, we can increase friendships in classrooms. And so children can be much more open to inclusion than adults, right? They read a lot of the cues from us as adults and how we work with students, how we treat students. And so really with inclusion, not just considering the academic side, but also considering the social emotional aspect. And so again, pulling from another cartoon from Michael Giangreco, this one depicting Joey noticed a mysterious force field around his assistant that children could not break through. And again, if you see a child working with an adult, the kids get the message of like, oh, like I can't really go talk to them, or the adults might push them away. And so as adults, stepping back and letting kids take the lead, right? And they will find strengths that we might overlook, and they will actually end up helping us, foster those strengths and foster that friendship, right? Every kid deserves to be included, again, not just academically, but from a friendship perspective. We have to help kids have these opportunities to see each other as friends.
Absolutely. And for anyone out there who is a parent, Carrie and I, as parents of young children, talk about this frequently. We really just want to see our children have a sense of belonging in school so that they can start to develop school as a sense of, a place where they fit, a place that they enjoy going to each and every day, particularly when they're at such a tender age. That's incredibly important, but through their academic career, that's really, really important. Okay, we do have one last video. It is brief, that we do want to show it to you because it's about a young child working through a mathematics problem. And so let's have a look.
And I'm going to ask you what number goes in that box, and then ask you how you know. David?
5.
5. Why do you think it's 5, David?
Well, it's really if it's 6 plus 2 there, and there's a 3 there, it would be just I couldn't decide between 5 and 7.
Oh, okay.
So 3 was like 3 was 1 more than 2. And 5 was 1 less than 6. Instead of doing the same way in my head, this how it was there, 6 plus 2, which would be 6, 7, 8, and then 5 plus 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I just to make sure, I double checked. And it was the same.
57 plus 38 equals 56 plus 39. Big numbers. Do you think that I expect you guys to add those in your head just real fast?
No.
Okay, 57 plus 38 equals 56 plus 39.
Oh my gosh.
True or false?
No, it's true, because it was like the one I did with that 6 plus 2 is the same as 5 plus 3.
Oh, okay, it's the same as this one. How is it the same?
There's like 57 is right there, and then 56 is right there, and there was 6 right there and 5 right there, and then there's 2, and then there's 38 there, and then 38 not there. 38.
Can you say anything? I'm a little confused. You said that the 57 is like the 6, and the 56 is like the 5?
Yeah.
And why?
Because the 5 and the 56, they're both one number lower than the other number. And the 2 and the 3, the one by the 50 by the highest number is the lowest, and then the one by the lowest number there would be more. So it's true. I think it's true.
Okay, and so I am going to go back to present mode. I'm not sure how to get there. Let me see. View.
Full screen.
Enter full screen. There we go. That was a lot smoother this time. Okay, and so we know that student had a lot of strengths, and the teacher was really drawing on those strengths. And so something that I really love about this video is how much the student is talking. The teacher asked very pointed follow-up questions to elicit higher order thinking in mathematics. And the questions were very open-ended, which I thought was really, really great. She was focusing on the process of his thinking and not the final product, even though his final products were correct. But she was really digging into having him explain how he was reasoning through these problems. And so we found this quote, which we think is a really, really poignant and appropriate quote. And it's, "Children don't hate math. What they hate is being confused, intimidated, and embarrassed by math." And so I'm sure many of us can relate to this quote, or at least we know someone who can relate to this quote. But we feel that mathematics is a particularly ripe subject, even in the early childhood classroom, for enacting strength-based approaches, because we can provide students in mathematics with lots of choices, lots of manipulatives, and we can celebrate productive struggle and the idea that there are many ways to approach and to solve a problem. So just like in the video we just watched of David, we can support students' higher order thinking by asking open-ended questions and focusing on the process rather than the product. And so when we think about holistic approaches to development and how these really map on to inclusive practices in education, we came up with some teacher actions. And so again, this is just reminding everyone as we wrap up this school year about these holistic approaches to development and the specific teacher actions. So presuming competence is really important. Making room for student voice. So really asking those open-ended questions. Providing choices for your students. Encouraging translanguaging or the use of students' home languages when appropriate. Celebrating productive struggle. And then building supportive communities. So students need to feel a sense of belonging and they need the social support as much as the academic support. And we tried to map on some specific examples for all of those teacher actions. And so in presuming competence, really think about multimodal literacies and providing students with manipulatives, right? Is a lot of what you're doing, does it require auditory input for students, or are there different ways we can get at the same sorts of content and experiences? In making room for student voice, ask students for input. Ask students open-ended questions. In providing choices, you can do things like choice boards or answer gardens, right? Really let students feel like they're in control by providing them with some choices that still get at the same sorts of things for you as a teacher. The encouraging translanguaging, as we talked about, is allowing the home languages to be spoken and written as often as possible, particularly when students are brand new to the school. Celebrating productive struggle, right? Really thinking about students' persistence. So provide frequent and positive formative feedback. A student struggling with something, that is a student learning, right? And so we want to celebrate that. And we want to show students that that's something that we're celebrating. It's not all about getting the correct answer as quick as possible. Sometimes it is about really thinking things through, and that's a good thing. And then building supportive communities. We want to encourage friendships among all students. And students will pick up on the cues from the teachers. So it's really being mindful of how we are communicating what we're doing and how we're doing it to the students. Carrie, did you want to add anything? I just kind of talked through all that.
No, it's totally fine. So just being mindful, right? Again, we see students for this really short amount of time when you think about it. Like, I know the school year feels like horrendously long, especially right now. It's a marathon, right? You spend, 180 days with these students, but also thinking about like, what is their trajectory going forward, right? So thinking about like, we need to teach them, the skills and the units and the curricula and all that good stuff, but also how are we, by either including or excluding students, impacting their future ability, right? To get a job, to go to college. Like, what is their goal? What is their dream? Is their dream to get a job? What is their dream job? What is their goal to attend college, not attend college? Do they want to, have a family, right? Do they want to find somebody who's going to love them and find that partner for life? Do they want a house? Are we setting them up for that, right? And so that really comes from being inclusive, right? Is thinking, what is their life beyond the K-12 experience? And how are we helping them on that journey? So the academics, like, of course, absolutely important, but really being mindful of tapping into those strengths to help them live that life beyond school.
Absolutely. And when we look at, these holistic approaches, it's important to remember that this does, being more inclusive is not a huge overhaul in your teaching practice, but it's really that small shifts in mindsets and practices can stack up to making a big difference and having a big impact positively for your students.
Mm-hmm.
And then we really wanted to end our session with you looking at this quote and reminding you all, this has been a year, that in case no one told you today, you are a great teacher. The fact that you are here attending a session on enacting strength-based approaches means you care enough about your students to be making the best environment possible for them. And so you are a great teacher. And we just really want to make sure that we remind you of that. Here are some references that we've drawn on to build this presentation.
And we are happy to share more resources with you, like any questions that you've had come up, any of the videos.
Yes.
Those links can certainly be provided, as well as like a host of plenty of other videos that we have if you want to dig even further into this.
Yes, and I promise to not have as many technical difficulties that time around. And so we are going to transition now into the collaborative portion of our time together. And so we have a Jamboard set up for us to work collaboratively on together, and some other resources to share. So I'm going to stop this recording